Welcome to Friday's video in our second master series. I do believe this is the 77th video in our second master series, the 26th video in our basic processors, and the 13th video in dealing with reverb and convolution. So I really hope that so far in this testing you can understand the importance of it, because if you really sit down and think about how much money people spend on really nice studios and how different a lot of them are, that you really start to understand why I see this as your next biggest gun and the importance of you studying and analyzing what's happening. Because once you get yourself a small library and you start really going through all the things we've been talking about so far, the control you have of the environment, because it doesn't take much sometimes. That, let's say that I've got Beyonce and I've got an impulse response that sounds great on Ray Charles, but it doesn't sound so good on her, and I need to think about why it doesn't and analyze it to see what's going on and what characteristics might sound better with her that are not conflicting with her. This room needs to sound warmer, or it needs to sound with a little more high end, and that's might come from the impulse response in my convolution reverb work. Does that make sense? To take my impulse responses, my convolution reverb, and look at them like it's me building a room, and that I have the power to take a simple response like a medium hall and make it sound like it is this beautiful medium-sized studio room that's been sound sculpted by an acoustician. So an acoustician has come in there and he's chosen certain material that's going to have to do with, sound sculpting, adding saturation, noise, and distortion levels, or attenuating them or boosting them with different materials, reflective materials, absorptive materials in different areas that are going to help sculpt the sound, and, have to do with the frequency response of what's happening. And also, besides those things, is the impulse response of the levels of the initial reflections, and what reflections in what shape as they tail off to later reverberations, and what shape they come back as. And the more you analyze these and the more you study these, and testing your convolution reverb and your impulse responses to see what they are, what is in them, how that sounds affected when you have, your initial sound, the impulse response itself, the difference of what's happening there, what the convolved aspect of those two things coming, with certain amounts, the difference of them, like I just said, is you trying to take your convolution reverb and your impulse responses and being able to test and analyze so that you can make it sound like it's in any nice room you want with certain characteristics. This comes with time, because I'm not going to tell you that I can just say, okay, here's this medium hall, cut to 50 milliseconds I've done anything to. And we talk about all the things that we've done. First of all, we want to clean it up. We want to flatten the frequency response. And then we want to filter it to clean up anything out that we don't want it. We want to adjust adjust possibly the pre-delay on it and see, how much pre-delay we want. 5 milliseconds, 10, 20 milliseconds, what? Then we start sound sculpting with saturation, noise, and distortion to get it sounding good, have a nice sound. It sounds a little gritty. It sounds lush. It sounds full. It sounds smooth. What's it sound like? Add noise, distortion, saturation to it. We start equalizing it. We start looking for problem areas and doing everything we did in equalization with it. We cut down the impulse response. We choose smaller ones. We either make them just sound really good, or we try to tailor them to the sound that we're looking for, because that's different than trying to take it into a nice room that's like a sound sculpted impulse response. And when that's using our convolution reverb real well, you testing and analyzing this is you taking yourself to this next level as an audio engineer and having complete control of your environment and trying to become an acoustician as best as you can. We have to think about that it's a three-dimensional thing when we have a surround sound that's an impulse response being related to us in a two-dimensional atmosphere as an impulse response. That may be stereo, and we might do one side or the other a little bit differently to make it sound more stereo if we're working with stereo tracks, duplicated tracks, and things like that. They can add to that effect. And we're really trying to take a two-dimensional atmosphere sculpt it like an acoustician, like we're an acoustician building a studio around this sound that we've isolated away to try to minimize sound coming in, which brings us back to, taking our time when we're doing our captures to minimize effects in the room, only allowing effects in the room that we want, then cleaning them up maybe in RX and filtering them and, going through with equalization and all kinds of things besides sound sculpting. And then on top of it, all the stuff that happens when we convolve these things in together, like we've talked about, that all convolves together to add even more stuff in there that we want to have control of. So analyzing the effects of these is really a huge step in you becoming that next master audio engineer. Testing you what your convolution reverb's doing, testing what the impulse response is, testing what it has in it, what its effect is on kick drums or a drum set or a flute or a violin or a vocalist or certain type of vocalist or certain types of productions. Certain type of productions, you might have to rework an impulse that you start out with a flat frequency response because it's a jazz production in a small hall like a jazz cafe, or it's a reggae production that you want to sound like it's outdoors a little bit, or it's a reggae production or a country grungy band that in some small country bar that you're trying to get that effect. Besides adding a little bit of ambience, that you're really becoming an acoustician in analyzing what's happening. So it's going to take some time with you reading about convolution reverb, reading about reverberation, reading about things like RT60s, and reading about room responses, what they are, what happens when it's convolved into a two-dimensional atmosphere rather than a three-dimensional atmosphere, and being able to look at different aspects of it and go, well, no, I want to shape this volume of this. Besides sound sculpting and spectral content, I want to shape this a little bit more. I want to put this on here and take it into my DAW maybe. A prime example is, I might take this impulse response and I might go in here and shape it with volume automation. A simple thing, there's millions of different ways to do this. But a simple thing, if I go in here and use my volume automation and I'm starting here from 0 and I want to attenuate this down some, and then I want to bring this up over here, I want to bring this down over here, I want the ADSR to be shaped in a certain way, right? Because you can actually shape the ADSR of the impulse response so the ADSR works the way exactly you want the ADSR to sound sculpt the actual response, which you aren't as in much control of each individual early reflection and late reflection, but you can control it a lot with working on the ADSR and then taking this and rendering this file, and you've shaped the ADSR of that impulse response. Does that make sense? And on top of it, you can go in there and find problem areas. You can go inside of it, find problem areas. This one's too high, this one's too low. You want to go in there and really sound sculpt it. Does that make sense? And you can use different responses to convolve together or use parts of different responses. The deeper you get into it, testing and analyzing it, the more of an acoustician you become in using your convolution reverb and understanding how powerful it is to shape your bodybuilding stuff, to give it lush, full, thick sounding presence, and building that, spatialization effect of adding that atmosphere and, atmosphere and things like that to where it's at and what space it is. And sometimes it's not much and sometimes a little bit more, but you've got complete control of that environment with a nice cleaned up capture that you've worked on really well, and you've analyzed all this stuff really well to really take your abilities to the next level, so that you've taken your equalization, your first biggest gun, to the next level, and you're becoming an acoustician with your knowledge of your convolution reverb and testing and analyzing it, testing your environmental concerns, capturing and controlling things, cleaning things up, filtering things, and testing your convolution reverb, the impulse responses, sculpting, shaping them, so that you have total control of those three aspects with your convolution reverb and your equalization are huge, and are going to have, besides you just doing a job of your capture, your initial capture, initial performance, and sound sculpting, those things are going to be the next biggest guns. You thinking of yourself as an acoustician, testing and analyzing these things so that you have complete control of the environment to do these type of things, testing and analyzing and seeing what's going on and listening and working on your listening while you're analyzing and visualizing these things, to actually look at yourself as an acoustician in working with your convolution reverb, and you will more and more understand why I steer clear of a lot of other types of reverbs, and I try to teach you to master these and master usage, understanding, analysis, and testing of them to understand what you're doing them, what it's putting into it, what it's convolving into it, and what its role is, so that you can learn to master your environment and master the other sound sculpting tool of using it to body build and what it's doing and adding to it and testing it and understanding it to take you to that next level as a next level master audio engineer with your next biggest gun by testing and analyzing what's happening and honing your abilities as an acoustical person, an engineer, and being able to control your environment. Peace, hope, love. I certainly hope you enjoyed these 3 videos on testing and analyzing, and then you can ask me any questions you want in the comments, but I hope that gives you a good running start into it. And in the next video, I do believe we will be talking about the actual convolution reverb and the parameters that are available to us. Peace, hope, love. See you in the next video.